Thank you. I hope I am audible to all of you and my screen is visible to all. I am going to start
Yes,
this
yes.
presentation. Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you for the confirmation. So, starting with the requirement of this structure, sir, day by day we are seeing that the structural requirements are being more posed and technically challenged. And then same applies to the bridge bearings. For example, a very high exposure to wear, requirement of higher accumulated sliding displacement, extreme climatic and environmental conditions, and the displacement and rotation can also be in a higher frequency, magnitude, and velocity. So there is a very important thing comes that we have to select a correct bearing which is suitable for the structure. Like in the field of bearings, there are so many bearings available. The oldest one is our rocker roller hinge bearings. Then after there is an elastomeric bearings, disc bearings, spot PTFE, metallic guided, spherical and isolation pendulum bearings are the latest one. Starting with the bearings, rocker roller, these are one of the legendary bearings used in the field of railway, initially developed, and these are giving a higher service lifespan in the entire life of the structure. But only thing is, it is completely made up of steel. If we are seeing the structure, the bearing, the bearing is completely made up of steel. But what it happens is, if there is no proper maintenance and if there is no proper drainage system was there, then there is a chance that the bearing can be corroded. And due to direct contact of steel material to steel material, the corrosion will increase the friction between them, and that will further damage the entire performance of the bearing. So that will increase the chances to change the entire bearings after certain time interval if the proper maintenance was not conducted. Then after, there is another bearing which we called as elastomeric bearings. In the field of bearings, we are normally called these bearings are sandwich bearings. Why we called it sandwich is it's a very simple mechanism of steel plates and rubber sheets. If you can see the geometry of and the cut section of this bearing, you can get a very clear idea. So in how it works is it can works by the vertical displacement by a deflection of the bearing due to elastic compression. Rubber is a elastic material, so when the compression happens, that will be a vertical displacement alloy. But there are certain things which will made it limited for the structural use. Like if the bearings are not produced correctly, then there is a several kind of defects happens. If you can see in these images, you can get a very clear idea what would happens in the bearing. In the right, in this image, you can see there is a bubbles which has been clearly visible. Similarly, there are some cracks at the surface of the bearing. The only thing which is making this bearing softer is the entire bearing is made up by a rubber and steel laminate, but it has been confined with a rubber cover. And this cover is a softer material comparison to any other thing like our other bearings, steel bearing. So there is an importance come that whenever this kind of bearings has been used, there is always need to be take care during not only for the during the manufacturing but also during the installation. If there is a proper manufacturing has been conducted, so bearing will not found any kind of defects during the inspection stage. But sometimes it has also been done that during installation things are being ignored, and that is why the other kind of damage will be comes. If you can see this image, during the installation the teams are not understanding what exactly these bearings are, and they have pasted some epoxy material at the side of the bearing. Now these bearings are no more workable because what will happen in future, after 2 or 3 months the surface has been hardened and the entire bearing has been cracked. Similarly, you can see these things will be happens if there is no proper installation. So these the rubber bearings are good enough for providing the damping, for providing the movements, and for providing the load distribution. But in addition to that, there is an external requirement that we have to need take care of, special care of these bearings during manufacturing as well as the installation. Other than that, there are disc bearings. Now, when the field of the engineers has been finded out that the entire rubber material is effective with the environment, they have tried to remove this rubber material and provide some other material just like polytetrafluoroethylene material and develop a new kind of bearing that they call disc bearing. Now you can see this is the geometry of disc bearing, which is not having any kind of rubber material inside it. It is completely made up of steel and a thermoplastic material which is we call as polytetrafluoroethylene material. Now these bearings are working good, but what would happen is there is always having a center pin in these bearings, which has been providing a control movement during the function of the structure. Now, the problem with these bearings are the center pin is located at the center of bearing, and there is always some gap between this center pin and the remaining portion of the bearing. That is provided for taking the rotation of the bearings and also providing the damping of the bearing. But in addition to that, there are this gap will also allow the the moisture and the dust will comes inside this area, and at a certain time interval there is a rust, a failure, or you can say a major kind of effect comes over this bearing due to failure of this pin. Then after looking to these limitations of elastomeric and disc bearing, the IRC has been introduced a new bearing that they called as spot PTFE bearing. These are the advanced form of, or we can say combination of elastomer and a steel bearing, which is having, which is fulfilling the requirement of elastomer as well as the steel, are capable for taking higher forces comparison to any other bearing because these are steel component. But in addition to that, there is a certain requirements or some limitations in these bearings also. For example, there is a wearing happens in the components if the rotations are higher. Also, the effective sealing system has to be used in these bearing, and these bearing can accumulate sliding due to rotation also. So, like I am saying about the sealing element. So, what exactly this sealing element is? These are the main three sealing elements in the in case of pot PTFE bearing. The one is the form sealing, the another is the brass sealing, and the last one is the stainless steel sealing system. The most common sealing system used in railways is brass seal system. Some in other areas there are form sealing systems was also there, and in few areas they are using stainless steel sealing system. What this sealing system done is, I am just showing you with this animation. You will be getting a very clear idea what exactly happens by failuring of this sealing system. So if you can see, this is a normal pot PTFE bearings, and this is elastomer, and this is particular where my cursor is a sealing system. So now, under the working condition, when the bearings are under working, there is a direct contact of this softer material, which is made up of either foam or of brass. It comes in direct contact of high strength steel, which is either cast steel or mild steel, and after certain time interval, this repetitive rotation will allow the wearing of this sealing elements. And what exactly happens is this sealing element has been damaged, and due to this damage, the elastomer which is inside this bearing will be coming out. So you can see this image where you can get a clear idea that this kind of failure can also be happens in these pod PTFE bearings if the sealing systems are not properly used. This is a pad which is coming out from the bearing. These all are some other images also. Now, another thing is there is a gapping creation due to restoring movement of the bearings. In case of pot PTFE bearing, there is another failure of thermoplastic material. I am showing you in another animation to giving you how this gapping has been created in case of pot PTFE bearing. So you can see when the loads apply, the rubber material which is inside the bearing has been compressed. So rubber has a tendency whenever you are trying to compress it, they will try to come out on its original shape. without applying any forces. But due to all this condition, what exactly happens is there is a gap creation between the thermoplastic material and the steel component. And after that, when the dust and the other particles will come in contact of thermoplastic material and the sliding sheet, there is a major wear comes in the thermoplastic material. And these images will showing you a clear idea that these thermoplastic material will be damaged like this in the form of sheet. For this particular reason, in some of the codes, they have been given a guideline to check these bearings to use inside the railway structures or railroad bridges, just like AREMA. Now, that means there is a requirement of modern bridges, or we can say our structures are modern now and they need some different requirement comparison to the olden structures. So the thing comes is the loads are more different. There is the rotations of the end girders are more accumulated movements of the bridge. The horizontal force are considerably higher. When the train suddenly breaks over the bridge, you can assume that the horizontal force is acting over the structure. And in case of high speed traffic also, the displacement takes place with an higher displacement velocity. So now again, this displacement and rotation has been increased by its frequency, magnitude, and velocity. So now, then in 2014, the new bearings has been introduced by checking all the criteria of the bearings and the limitations and failures. There is a requirement come to introduce new bearings, which is more or less similar to our rocker roller bearing, but only difference is there is no direct steel to steel contact in case of spherical bearing. If you can see, the concept of rocker roller bearings has been completely used inside this spherical bearing design, but only difference is this different sheet, or we can say a thermoplastic sheet used between the steel component to decrease the friction between this material, and then you can achieve the higher service life of this bearing. So this is the function of this spherical bearing. Now, these bearings can be produced in cylindrical format as well as the spherical format. This is a cylindrical kind of bearing which is also available. Similarly, in our structure, sometimes there is a requirement like structures are having a pre-settings in case of movement, but there are requirement that there is also a requirement of pre-setting in terms of rotation. If the selection of bearings is not correct, then there is a possibility that the bearing could not survive under the working condition. Similarly, in case of spherical bearing, the load transfer are more pronounced, more we can say more proper, so that the higher forces can also be transferred by using these bearings. Now, the material which is used inside the spherical bearings are normally only two. One is the steel, which is giving you a higher service life, and the second one is the thermoplastic material. The thermoplastic material which is used inside the bearing is PTFE, which is developed in 50s, and it is the only material providing a higher loads and very low friction between the materials. But now there are some cases where this material is not fulfilling the requirement of the structure. So if you can see, it's an just example. It's a Tijo bridge in Lisbon. It's a rail cum road bridge where the PTFE bearings are being used. But you can see the images which can giving you an idea that how the PTFE sheet has been failed from the bearing. So now this has been initiated the requirement of new material which can fulfill at least these kind of failure and fulfilling the structural requirements also. So there will be a test conducted by the authorities, and they have been checked what is the maximum capacity of this thermoplastic material. And during this test, considering a 10 kilometers of sliding path with a velocity of 2 millimeters per second and a pressure of 30 millimeters, there is a major failures found in the PTFE sheet. So they have been finded out that at this situation there will be a failure comes in the bearings and bearing need to be changed. In addition to that, there is also some requirements of high speeds where this PTFE has not been worked. And also our requirements of this structure is to work up to 80 years minimum. So the research will be started, and during this research there is a new modified material has been manufactured, that the generic name is UHMWPE, ultra high molecular weight polyethylene, which is without any filler and regenerative materials and with some additives which improve the sliding and load carrying behavior. It is also similar to thermoplastic material like PTFE, but without components such as fluorine, chlorine that are harmful for our environment. But now, how it will improve the life of the bearing is the same test has been conducted over this sheet, and they have even found out that even up to 50 kilometer sliding path with a higher velocity of 15 millimeters per second and a double pressure of 60 MPa, there is no major failure in the sheet. And further, there is a shining marks over the steel, the component, the sliding component, which is normally stainless steel, which further reduce the friction between these components. So now by using this advanced material, we can design our bearings up to which can work up to 50 years and can also suitable for doing a fast movement, higher stresses, very low friction and highest lifespan and work up to 70 degrees centigrade environment. So this is one of the tests conducted over this PTFE and this UHMWP sheet, and the result you can see here. The PTFE sheet has completely been failed around 48 degrees centigrade, that is same already mentioned in our IRC code also, whereas the advanced material can work up to 70 degrees centigrade. This is just an animation to show you what exactly happens with increase in temperature. I think there is some error, but what exactly it works is it will gives an indication that whenever the temperature rises, there should be failure happens in the thermoplastic material, because thermoplastic material is temperature sensitive. In addition to all these things, there is one advantage with this bearing, which is normally during the inspection, in case of pot PTFE bearing, everything is inside the bearing, normally like the you can say the rubber, which is made up of chloroprene or natural rubber, which is confined with a steel cylinder. So at the time of inspection, the authority has no idea what exactly happened inside the bearing, or is there any sealing failure happens in the bearing. But on the other way, in case of a spherical bearing, everything will be exposed at the surface of the bearing. So there is no hidden part inside it. So that will also be a better solution during the inspection of the bearing. Now, with the help of this modified material, we can achieve highest lifespan of the bearing and also suitable for the higher displacement and friction velocities. Additionally, there is another. We are now in the previous slides, up to previous slide, we have been reducing the friction between the material by improving the by involving the advanced material inside the bearing. But now the second major problems in the bearings are the corrosion, which is majorly affecting the steel component. So now the new invention in this field is it's a alloy material which is made up of some ingredients of aluminiums and other are the ingredients which has been used to reduce the completely corrosion effect over the steel material. So now by using this material, the friction as well as the corrosion has completely been removed. So even if there is a very highly corrosive environment, there is a possibility to provide a bearing solution which can fulfill the requirement of the structure. And these advanced materials are accepted in our codes also, in our Indian codes as well as the foreign codes. These are some references of our codes. So in short, by using an advanced material and using our oldest technology of rocker roller bearing, these bearings are fulfilling the requirement of higher stresses and loads, higher rotations and movement, with high velocity displacement and providing a low friction coefficient, much more wear resistance, stability at higher temperature, and highest lifespan. There is another case study of Signature Bridge, Wazirabad, Delhi. I hope most of you have already visited there. It's a very special kind of structure has been developed in India, which is having a requirement of bearing of a capacity 23,000 metric ton. Yes, 23,000 metric ton is the capacity of the bearing. The bearings has been located at the bottom of this pylon. So you can see this is the pylon, and the pylon has taken care of only two bearings at this end, and the entire structure has been the entire load of the structure has been coming over this bearing. That is why the requirement of these bearings are quite high. So by the contractors has been trying to find out the best solution for this, and unfortunately, by using any kind of bearing, even the elastomeric, pot PTFE, and available disc bearing, there is no available bearings which can fulfill this requirement. At that time, IRC has also not published our code IRC 2014 for the spherical bearing. So at that particular time, they have no solution to resolve this. But when this started, the discussion started, and the requirement has been understood. It has been come that there is an advanced technology available in the market which can only fulfilling this requirement of the structure. In addition to that, there is one another challenge in this structure, which is called as the movement during construction. One is the movement which is coming during the service span of the structure, but this is the movement which is coming during the construction. Now, by getting this requirement, we have been designed these bearings in a very special format, which can fulfill the requirement of movement during the construction as well as after the completion of the structure. So this is the assembly of this bearing. These bearings are completely manufactured and controlled, highly controlled during the production. These are some images of these bearings. So this has completely been controlled during the production, and not only during production but also the assembly of the bearing, during the assembly part of the bearing, and after that it has been supplied and installed in the structure. So this is the actual final bearing. You can see these all are spherical bearings, or we can say these are one of the largest bearing ever used in our India. Now another project is, it's a rail cum road bridge Bogeyville, where the requirement is of capacity of the bearing is 29,000 kilonewton. That means the bearing size is quite large. By using any kind of bearings which is available in the market is not getting the fulfillment of the structural limitation, and then after there is a solution comes with a special arrangement of pot PTFE bearing along with a heavy restrainers. These position 5 and 6 are a heavy restrainers used in this structure. But now when these heavy arrangement has been creating a construction constraint, there is a solution comes in the form of a spherical bearing. And by using this spherical bearing, there is a normal combination of these four types of bearings will fulfilling the structural requirement. The reason is these bearings are capable of directly transferring the load from the top component to bottom component. So that is why the pin bearings are not required in case of a spherical bearing. Now another advanced type of bearing in terms of spherical is seismic isolation pendulum bearing. With its name seismic isolation pendulum, it works basically on the principle of pendulum. That is why they called as isolation pendulum bearing. So similar to our pendulum, the design has been conducted, and these bearings are basically used in the highly seismic areas where the highly seismic events are conducted. So now coming on to another structure where I hope you all know about this Pamban bridge, which is has newly created. The old and new is both are you can see in my screen. So this is the new one at the back side, and this one is the old one. The old one are abandoned now because of heavy rusting. This is a highly corrosive environment at this location, and due to this corrosion, the entire structure is no more workable. And now there is a new structure has been developed at the same location, which is connecting Pamban with the Rameshwaram. And this bridge is having a very special kind of requirement. The special requirement is this structure can be lifted up during this passing of the ships and can be closed during the passing of the rail. So similarly, the requirement is very special for the bearing which has been provided at this location, which can also be recentered automatically when the structure comes down. So you can see in your screen, these are the actual bearings. These are isolation pendulum bearings which are used in this structure. And you can see this. The structure is moving up. So the half components of the bearings has been going up and the remaining has been placed at the bottom area. And when the structure comes down, then this bearing can all allows this structure to be centered automatically to its surface. These completely these all bearings are isolation pendulum bearings. And now to avoid the highly corrosive environment, these components which is open at during the lifting up of the structure is made up of special alloy, which is completely rust free. In addition to that, we have also been observed that there is a requirement of these structures, especially in case of steel structure, during changing of temperature. This structure demands for the lifting up of lifting up condition. This lifting up condition can be in two major forms, either in service condition or in ultimate condition. If it is in ultimate condition, that means once in a while it will be coming. But if it is in service condition, then it will be more critical. And at this particular time, there is a requirement that it can be controlled by using a proper arranged bearing. So normally, what we have been observed as the contractors are using a normal, or we can say the ultimate uplift bearings in case of uplift forces, but that will not fulfilling the requirements. So it is also need to be very important to check whether the uplift will be coming in service condition or it is coming in the ultimate condition. If there is a service condition requirement, then it has to be used that it has a requirement to be used a proper bearing, which I have been shown on my screen. This is a special arranged bearing which can use in service condition of uplift. Other than all these factors, there is a very important thing which has to be make this bearing, which make this bearing performable, is the quality checks. These quality checks we have been make in three major steps. One is the test during the test of the raw material, in process inspection, and the third one is the finished product inspection. For the raw material, it can be either client witness, third party inspection, or it may be reviewed. In process has been controlled by the third party as well as the manufacturer quality control. And at the finish, it can be witnessed by the client or or otherwise the third party inspector. These three things can control the entire quality of the bearing, which can avoid the major chances of bearing during the major chances of bearing failure during the service condition. So now for that, it is necessary that to check the raw material in both ways, chemically and mechanically, by using different equipments available in the market or machinery available in the market to check all the compositions, chemical composition as well as the mechanical properties of the bearing, of the raw material. And these machines are giving an idea of the raw material which has been used for the manufacturing of these bearings. After that, there is a requirement to check the components dimensions properly before starting the production of these bearings, and to check the soundness of quality of the casted or the steel material, whether it is fulfilling or not. And if all these things has been completely checked, and then after it has been used during the production of the bearing, the 70% chances has been removed, the which is responsible for the failure of this kind of bearing. So now after this, all these things during production as well as after production of or the machining of these component, it has to be checked completely by ultrasonic testing, dye penetration testing, buffing of the surfaces, thermoplastic material greasings, and final paint coat thickness as per the requirement of the structure. So all these things will reduce the chances up to 70% of the bearing defects, but still there is a requirement in our IRC codes that has to test a finished bearings also, which can fulfilling at least the requirement of the structure. For that, there are different kind of presses used, hydraulic presses, which can trying to make a similar kind of situation like structure, and they have been tested the bearings in presence of the client as well as the contractor to show the performance of the bearings has been fulfilling or not. By all these things, after this completion of all quality checks and quality criteria, when the bearings has been sent to the installation location, there is very important things which has to be take care of during installation. If there is any kind of or we can need to check that is there any kind of deformation in the major deformation at the structural location, or is there any kind of inclination, or is there is any kind of additional requirement of the structure. It has to be addressed during the installation of the bearing. Otherwise it will affect to the major it will affect majorly to the damage of the structural bearing. Apart from all this, it has also been observed sometimes that it has not properly been identified. In some of the cases, we have been observed that the wrong bearing has been placed at wrong location. Generally, bearings are having identification marks over it, but at the time of installation, sometimes it has been escaped. For the fixed kind of bearing, there is always a circle over the bearing. For free kind of bearing, which can move in both directions, can having a unidirectional movement, and having a bearing which can move only in one direction, having this kind of marking over it. So before installing these bearing, it is also need to be identified properly. That will also comes in a part of quality and the performance of the structure. Other than all these things, it is also need to be checked whether the grouting which has been done at the bottom or at the top of the bearing has been proper or not, because it is also a responsible factor during the load transfer of the bearing. When the load comes over the bearing, they will directly compress the either means it will be creating a pressure at the bottom and the top connection. So if the bottom connection is not sufficient strength, then there is a failure comes in it. Sometimes it has been observed that there is a honeycombing happens at the bottom of this structure. So this is all from my side. If you have any question, please feel free to share.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Rohit. There has been a great response from the audience. There was almost about 10 questions, and I feel that, or I understand that you have to rush to another meeting or so in another 10 minutes. So that may not be really possible for you to answer those questions. So what can we do at the end of the seminar, rather at the end of the day today? There is possibility of having an half an hour time within which we can reschedule you to answer those questions. So I think that may be better. Or otherwise,
Yeah,
if you have time, then you can take a few questions. What do you
yeah,
prefer?
please, sir, please. I can open the chat section.
Yeah.
So the first, how to decide what type of bearings are required with respect to the vertical, horizontal, rotation, displacement, and the reference of available for railway and roadways. So the important thing here it is, sir, uh, all the bearings, whether it is elastomeric bearing, whether it is spot PTFE bearing, or if it is a bearing like the spherical bearing, it is important first to see the environmental condition where you are going to use these bearings. The second important thing is if it's a very highly corrosive environment, or if it is a very dry environment, or there is a higher temperature environment, like it is going to be used in somewhere in south, where the temperature will goes right down in during today's around 48 degree, then you have also need to check whether the bearings which are going to be used at this locations are correct or not. Majorly, what we have been finding out is that even if the requirement of the structure is quite high, the contractors has been decided the bearings based on their cost. Bearings which is more economical in terms of price has been selected, which is not the criteria which fulfill the requirement of a structure. If your movement is quite high, if your requirement of load is quite different comparison to our existing or present structure, then it is need to be taken care by the proper arrangement of the bearing. The elastomeric bearings are suitable for small structures which are having not having a very huge kind of requirement of you can say the vertical compression, because this is a major thing. Elastomeric bearings are completely exposed to the weather. So what exactly happens is whenever the exposure of the environment comes in directly comes with the rubber material, it is having an aging factor. So this aging has been reducing the life of the entire bearing. And in case of elastomeric bearing, what we have been observed is in every 5 to 10 years, it is necessary to be inspected at the location. And the maximum lifespan of these bearings are 15 years, which is always dependent on the requirement of movements as well as the requirement of the loads which is coming over the structure. Like if there is a frequent load coming over the structure, similar to railways, then the elastomeric bearings are quite uh, it is necessary to be checked whether it is fulfilling or not, because it is also creating a negative impact to the structural steel. And when the requirements is like when there is a requirement that you have to use a high damping in case of structure, then there is a requirement come that you can go with the elastomeric bearings also. Apart from elastomeric bearings, if we are using a pot PTFE bearing, these are also suitable for the structure which are having a movement limitation of around, you can say, approximately 100, 100 and 150 mm. If the movement range is going more, then there is a additional cantilever effect comes in case of pot PTFE bearing because of involvement of elastomer inside it. So that will increase the chance of bending of top plates during the working condition. So at this particular time, or you can also need to go with the bearings which has fulfilling this requirement also. In this case, it is suggested to go with the spherical bearings, and sometimes there is a restrictions also, like you have a restriction at your structure, you cannot go with this dimension. The footprint of bearing is quite high because everything has been designed from the center of the bearing. This center has decided the overall size of the bearing. So this is also a very important part that you have to decide when the force come over the bearing. Center part of the bearing has been designed first. If the elastomer pad which is inside the bearing is quite large, then the overall size of your bearing will also be large, and this will further makes a requirement that you have to increase the size of your structure also. So these things has to be checked during the selection of the bearing, and on that basis you will be getting a higher service life during the entire structure condition. So other is, what is the criteria for adopting the spherical bearing for steel vessels? The major criteria is during the structure. Yeah, yes, sir.
Yeah, please continue.
Okay, thank you, sir. So the next is the what is the criteria for adopting spherical bearings for steel bridges? So in case of steel bridges, the major requirement is the structure is not only working in, you can say, not only taking care of the vertical force or the movement which is coming by the live load conditions, it can also be behaving during the environmental changes. So now there is a thing comes in a mind whenever their requirement is that you have a your structure is demanding something special rather than there is a requirement of your general structure which is made up of concrete. Your structure is demanding something extra in case of, like similarly in case of steel structure, where sometimes it has been founded out there is a requirement of uplift in, especially in case of railway structure. So in this particular cases, there is only a solution that can go with is the spherical bearing. Or in case of railway structures, especially in case of railway structures, when the load is more pronounced, you can see the speed of the train is not. We cannot say it is similar to the speed of the vehicle which is moving over the structure. So at that particular time, the displacement is quite high, and this higher movement, or you can say the higher requirement of the structure, can be fulfilled by using a bearing which can be capable of doing this additional higher displacement as well as the load transfer. So this is the major criteria it comes during the selection of spherical bearing in case of structure, steel structure.